change the subject once again. I had a question. Most of these questions are from listeners, and they sent them to me either through Facebook yesterday, or I'm getting them right now on through a text. And I'll just read this one. How can DPI justify intruding on the traditional governor's school experience by imposing surveys about whiteness and gender? Now, if I may, the governor's school, if folks are not familiar with that, they can look it up, but it's a, how would you describe that before we continue on, the governor's school, for people who may not know what it is?
It's a summer program for academically gifted students who are selected to participate, that is funded by the state and is administered through the Department of Public Instruction.
And from the reading about the governor's school on their website, it says it's administered by the public schools of North Carolina, the State Board of Education, and the Department of Public Instruction. Now, and there's also a board of governors that are appointed to act as the advisory body. So the question was from the listener, very good question, how can DPI justify intruding on this school by imposing surveys about whiteness and gender? I wonder if you'd address that, please.
Well, I assume that the listener is referencing a graphic that was distributed in a classroom at the governor's school this summer that had to do with sexual identity.
That is correct. Let me just tell you that is your assumption is correct. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so I would, again, reiterate that the Department of Public Instruction does not provide curriculum materials to any school, including the governor's school. So this was an instance where a teacher made a choice to use something that they had in their toolkit. It did not come from the Department of Public Instruction. And I believe that the leadership at Governor's School has spoken with this teacher, and that the teacher is not using that document any longer.
Okay, so he's not using the document any longer, but this guy was fired. So you've heard of Tale of Two Cities. This is Tale of Two Teachers. And so this is just breaking today. And we'll just go ahead and fill you in. Hello and welcome, Nancy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. I've got my holiday sweater on. You've got your holiday lipstick on. We are good to go tonight. All right. So this professor, we knew it was coming. We'll talk to you a minute about that. Conservative professor was fired because as not only the DPI and the governor's school, both, as their staff started to tighter and tighter wrap themselves around critical race theory and the trans ideology, the more they did that, the more they discriminated. So don't believe what Catherine Truitt, who you just heard in the interview, and others will tell you that CRT is some abstract thing. It's a lesson in the toolkit. No, it is not. What it is it is a plan for behavior change. I know. I have written them myself. I had a whole business and whole industry wrapped around writing plans for behavior change. So CRT is writing plans for behavior change, and then environments turn to crap once they're instituted, and they're very dangerous. I mean, Nancy, Suter Conrad, who is a member of our board that we started to help maybe 2 years ago now, as her happy, harmonious workplace at an elementary school started to embrace, the staff started to embrace this equity, this DEI training. She began to experience a hostile work environment. She had to leave, just like this professor. Nancy.
Well, first of all, I just want to say for this professor, Dr. Phillips, he is an incredibly brave soul, a wonderful person, great teacher with glowing reviews. For him to have experienced what he experienced, come through it intact, and then have the integrity and the courage to go public with this lawsuit is one of the most amazing things I've seen, having done this for a couple years now. And kudos to him. And I hope everyone in comments and everything shows some support. So, thinking of him, I can't imagine this is easy right now with this going public. And he really represents so many teachers and students who have been forced to deal with this offensive, insulting, and just ridiculous ideology of critical race theory and queer theory and intersectionality
in practice
as fact, not just as a discussion, but this is how it is. And you have to believe it. And people who don't or who question it are ostracized. So much for inclusivity, right? And that is exactly what this lawsuit outlines. It's an amazing read. The Alliance Defending Freedom knocked it out of the park, I believe. It's very clear. I recommend everyone read it. And again, Dr. Phillips, he is an American hero at this point.
Right. But so we met Dr. Phillips about a year ago. That was the first time that you brought this to our attention, heard his story, etc. And a great attorney, Hal from ADF, who has taken on a lot of wonderful cases to defend, religious freedom and freedom of speech, which we're big champions of around here. So, let's walk back into this gender unicorn, okay? Because we're going to go way, 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 way back. And it's interesting that this lawsuit, Nancy, brings up some old names for us. So the lawsuit quite literally goes after enemies of ours. And I'm not talking about, on the margin. I'm talking about some people we've had some run-ins with, right? So we brought this up, Nancy, you brought this to the Lieutenant Governor's attention back in July of last year.
Yeah, I've got my little binder booklet that I gave them.
Binder, baby. We're ready to.
We have a couple of these. A whistleblower came forward.
But I want to back up and give a little bit more background too. Yeah. The way that this school works is students from all over the state, the best and the brightest, very venerable program. This is a captive audience, you guys. Because you've got, they live in a dorm type situation. And for a lot of students, in fact, I'd venture to say most, it's their first time away from home, right? So they are in an environment and they're from 13 years up and up. Bill, we agree with you and we're going to make our case a little bit more. So it's a captive audience. It's not like, okay, you've got, some CRT lessons or whatever, and you can walk away. That ain't it. This is a full immersive experience.
Right. No, they're away from it's students across the state, away from their parents, immersed in this 4-week. Well, it used to be like 6 weeks, I think. Now it's 4 weeks experience on campus, living together in dorms with the teaching assistants, etc. And there are 2 locations in the state where they have this during the summer. So yeah, they're a very captive audience. And in the summer of 2021, a whistleblower came to No Left Turn in Education and talked about some questionable curricula the student had received and couldn't really feel comfortable pushing back against. And we were given a series of slides from the Area 3 class in 2021. And in Area 3, there's 3 areas in this school. Area 1, which is the primary subject the student wants to study there. So if you want to go for math or music or theater arts or something like that, there's Area 2. And then there's Area 3, which are kind of along the lines of like a study of society and current events and that type of thing. So the students have to attend those classes. They don't have the option to opt out. And this was confirmed by the DPI at the time when I emailed them. And they were taught in the series of slides, which I have here, which I gave in person to the governor in July, which ended up in his task force.
The lieutenant governor.
Yeah, lieutenant governor, sorry. in his office because I thought it was too important to just email. Like he needed to see it in person. It was full of critical race theory, full of gender ideology, queer theory, intersectionality. The gender unicorn was handed out to the students and they had to fill it out, although they didn't have to turn it in. They're filled with privilege lists, like not just white privilege, which many may have seen by now, but cisgender privilege, heterosexual privilege, male privilege, intellectual privilege for a gifted program.
That's a good time to bring this up. This is actually, and this you brought to Catherine Truitt's attention. So look, Nancy and I have talked to Catherine Truitt since the very beginning, since, for 2 years now. We've gone into her office and met with her and her staff. We have emailed with her. We have let her know at every step of the way and warned her, hey, you've got a problem here. You've got a problem here. The governor's school is no different. This is the hiring guidelines for the governor's school, May 2021. These are the recommendations. You'll see that they keep track of how many white people, women, men, minorities, and part of this lawsuit also states that, it's your usual suspects, the white, straight, Christian, conservative students, and this professor were, treated atrociously.
Right. If you wanted to discuss anything beyond that, if you were brave enough to discuss anything beyond that, let alone, people knew not to discuss anything beyond that, but if you were brave enough to bring it up, you were scorned. People looked down on you. Not everyone. There were some who treated others well and respected the views, but there were
a lot of hostile environment. So
there were definitely a number of staff that would not tolerate those kind of views. And as you can see, this is from the top down because that was a board presentation in May, looking at applicants for the board of directors for the governor's school, or board of governors for the governor's school. And there were 3 candidates for one spot. And you saw on the far right that one of the characteristics was race and ethnicity. And I think if you happen to own a business or involved in running a business, that's like the last thing you're supposed to look at. That's like a rights violation, isn't it? So I saw that in their meeting minutes from that year and I couldn't believe it. I said, what does that matter?
So this has a lot. So tonight, a lot of school board members are going to be watching from across the state because this case has big implications for the nation as well as for the state. So when we're talking about having, here's the difference. So if I'm going to sue someone, I don't know what this book is. Okay. The Daily Cause. All right. This is some book that I picked up at a bookstore. Okay. So this is a book and it doesn't hurt me, right? It's not discriminating against me. It's not causing violence against me. It's words. So the opponents of CRT want you to believe that, hey man, it's just words. Hey man, it's just real history. Okay. So when you have something like that, it is hard to sue over, you guys, right? Because it's academic freedom, freedom of speech. A lot of these concepts are freedom of religion or things like that. Hard to do something about. This is for the first time actual behavior. So when you have a firing, that's behavior. So that's easier to go after. Okay. So that's been gone after. Then you've got that chart that we just put up that Nancy pointed out. That shows also that, hey, if this is a column here of male and then the race, is there for a reason? Is there to be acted upon? And the same thing can be said for critical race theory. These are ideas hammered into a child's mind over and over and over again. Why? To be acted upon. You see, history is something that you read, you test to see if you're proficient, and you move on. You will never move on from CRT. It is in every single thing. And that's the point.
And there can be no opposition to it, as we see in this lawsuit. which again speaks to how brave Dr. Phillips is, and not only trying to take care of the situation within governor's school. And if you read the lawsuit, you'll see how many times he tried to bring
Tell us about it.
some of these issues.
Yeah.
And document and email some of the problems he came across, and tried to handle it within a program that he is deeply devoted to, but was just consistently ignored by those who are supposed to be overseeing this.
So let's talk about some of those people. And tonight, we're going to spill tea. We're going to let you know what goes on behind the scenes here at Ed First and some of the things we've done. So the lawsuit names a guy named David Stiegel. Okay. And I don't believe he's at the DPI anymore, but he was.
He was.
And so this is when we first kind of got started here at EFA. In April, we wrote a story that's, about an appointee that Catherine Truitt, she made a special spot for a woman that's just a far leftist and an activist. And so when I first wrote that story, I call balls and strikes. I don't care what party you're from. If it's a problem, it's a problem. So I wrote the story and wrote another story about critical race theory teaching in the schools and coming from the DPI. So Nancy and I were invited in. Actually, Nancy, I don't think you were invited in. I was invited. Check this out. I was invited in to a meeting, and I thought it was going to be Truitt and me, maybe one other person. We went in and they were rolling 10 deep. They had a room full of people and just us. We had to leave our phones outside of the room. And I knew at that point, right? Not going to go well. David Stiegel is the guy that we also spoke with, who vehemently denied the existence of CRT in the school, even though Nancy had her binder.
A different binder, not this binder, but a different binder.
You don't leave the house without a binder.
I know.
I have my purse, my makeup, everything I need to, because I'm vainglorious. You have the proverbial.
I need the pictures in front of me.
You're like Mitt Romney with a binder. Okay. You got a binder, lots of binders. Okay. But the point is that, Nancy, you had the proof, and they're saying, David Stiegel in particular, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? That's exactly what the lawsuit names David Stiegel, because, this professor went and complained to him, I think repeatedly, and he
might not been directly to him, but
it's mentioned there to him.
Directly to Stiegel? Okay, yeah. I didn't know if it went up the chain or not.
Yeah, well, probably didn't, because when you go on the chain of command,
seeing all this exactly.
You can only go to the chain of command so many times, and then whatever. But look, during, ironically, you guys, during the presentation where this professor was talking about viewpoint discrimination, right? He was talking about academic freedom and viewpoint discrimination. The students in there were extremely rude and disrespectful, showed disdain, and the staff. So you can only imagine, here you are in a profession that you love. Being a professor, being a teacher is a calling. And he was there from 2013, you guys, to 2021 or 2022.
Yeah, and he had attended governor's school as a student. He's very devoted to it.
Yeah.
He thinks it's a great program. And it was frustrating for him to see the open-mindedness become less and less, and the accountability to become less and less. And he went to extremes to make sure that those lectures, which by the way were optional, students didn't even have to attend it. It wasn't like the mandatory area 3 where the students were given the gender unicorn on a mandatory basis. Right. These were optional. You didn't have to attend his seminars about these subjects. So, and he got pre-approval, and he'd been given them before.
But everything changed as they began to really root down on this critical race theory. Right. Everything changed for him, he said, in a 2-year period. It just.
Yeah. And so it was really unfortunate, because he did try really hard. I've seen the lectures cited out the wazoo, incredible lectures. I'd love to have my students take these, or my kids take these lectures. And And yeah, he was just from a few staffers and students just hounded afterwards, and he was willing to stay and answer their questions as long as possible and listen to them and talk with them and go back and forth, but they were not having it. And before he knew it, he was let go without a reason, couldn't get a reason, and had to leave the campus the same day and
It was dehumanizing. It
couldn't
was
even,
humiliating.
yeah, couldn't even tell his students goodbye. So it's a really awful story. And again, to come through that, for this professor to come through that, to feel the strength within to come out and go public in this type of atmosphere, again, it's just, I hope everyone has a white pill and that there's hope out there, because this person is very brave and fighting back.
A doctor telling you about a pill. Don't try this at home. Okay.
It's the ideological white pill.
Yes. So we're going to talk about who heads this program. So Sneha Shah Coltrane is the director of gifted education at NCDPI. We have told you repeatedly, we have written stories on this. We caught a lot of heat on this. I mean, they put a target on our back for this story about this woman taking, in fact, she was elevated to this position by Superintendent Truitt. She wants to remove merit from academically gifted programs, wants to remove merit totally. And again, the hiring chart you saw, that's how they want to do gifted education. So that's one. And then Jeff Coltrane's her husband, who is Cooper's top education advisor. So top dog, Jeff with a G. I told you, Nancy, Jeff with a G. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, well, that's another concern for me, just personally, subjectively looking at this, is named in the lawsuit is Sneha Shah Coltrane as the director of Governor's School, which was a recent change. The Governor's School was under a different division within the DPI and was recently moved to the academically gifted division. And so her role as that director has only been very recent, like 2020 or 2021 even.
After, that's right. Was it after we complained about the unicorn or before?
Oh, no, it was before. She was moved before. I just can't remember exactly what year, but it was around 2020. So that she took over the role of Governor's School director. That division took over that role. And she is married to Governor Cooper's senior education advisor. So you have a direct line right to the governor, and she's named in the lawsuit. And so I just have to wonder, like, is the governor going to be up to anything regarding this, or what kind of blowback is going to come politically because of this lawsuit? Since it has tentacles to the governor's office, it's just something to think about.
It's viewpoint discrimination. It's something that the base on the left loves. They love it. So if anything, it will give him more bona fides than he has right now. I mean, and we also know that, the workhorse of the Democrat Party is in education already. So to me, this is in keeping exactly with what he would do. But look, here again, this is another example, yet another example of where Catherine Truitt was warned and she did nothing. Lisa,
I mean,
in charge.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so just in charge of Governor's School since 2021. So what this means is very likely is that after, and I do remember this, after we complained about and made public, and Lieutenant Governor made public the gender unicorn, sometime around that time. So she's a partisan hack, well known for being a partisan hack. So Truitt may have put her in even after she knew that there was a problem. How do we know, you guys, that she knew there was a problem? She was on the radio talking about it, so she can't deny it. Okay. So this is another example. We warned Catherine Truitt and others repeatedly about the Power School debacle, where she gave the okay and did not tell appropriate people in school districts all across the state. She made the decision to bend and listen to left-wing lawyers who told her, hey, it's a great idea that we make the gender, the sex, the biological sex of a student in the power school, the automatic school records. Let's make it so that only certain people can see that. Great idea. So again, on one hand, she had conservatives she could listen to. On the other hand, progressives. She chose the progressives. And I think that speaks volumes here.
Yeah, and it seems to me that if I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, and she did it because she was directed by the Biden administration, even though we haven't really seen that in other states.
We have seen it nowhere but North Carolina. Nowhere in North Carolina.
If that was the case, you would think that she would put out a press release ahead of time, telling people what these changes are going to be and pointing to what specific law or rule that they are doing it because of Biden, so that you would have that open communication between parents, schools, and the NCDPI. But that did not occur. The changes were made without any notification. Teachers were confused. They were getting different answers from local versus NCDPI versus who did it. And there was a significant amount of confusion. So even if you want to play devil's advocate and say, yeah, she did it because of the Biden administration, she certainly didn't let other people know she was doing it because of the Biden administration, and a whole mess of miscommunication occurred.
Right. And it's all about the teachers. I mean, we were getting a lot of communication from teachers and school board members who said, hey, dude, why can't I tell the biological sex anymore? And then it was up to us to find out and investigate what happened. And indeed, what happened was DPI made the decision to really listen to attorneys. We did some digging and found that the attorneys actually are LGBTQ activists. So, when you want to listen to LGBTQ activists over your own constituents and over really common sense people, I think that speaks volumes. Now, I want to point out something. Guys, you're going to hear some people on the right, some so-called conservatives who are going to blow smoke, as they say, and let Catherine Truitt off the hook. And I'm going to show you an example right here. So you've got really Superintendent Truitt's de facto press agent, Andrea A.P. Dillon at North State Journal. So she's already out there. Oh, the lawsuit doesn't name the superintendent. Well, it names the people that she's in charge of and the department she's in charge of and the people that she ran for office. She ran for office to lead this department. We've had this problem over and over again with Miss Dillon wanting to go out there and soft pedal things. I'm going to tell you now that Andrea Dillon has called the editors of the people that we write for to try to soft pedal things for for Superintendent Truitt and get our stories changed.
She called the editor on one of my pieces at American Thinker to try to get it changed.
As journalists, we don't do that.
Because I quoted, I used a quote from one of AP Dillon's articles and cited it and had it hyperlinked, and she didn't like the way I interpreted the quote and thought it should be removed entirely, and wrote the editors, who subsequently let me know that was going on, and they didn't remove it. They didn't remove what I said.
Well, and she also reported that on Twitter that she called Luke Rosiak with Daily Caller to let him know that Catherine Truitt has nothing to do whatsoever with the CRT and the disabled preschooler story that we did. It was a very big deal. It continues to be a very big deal. But she ran on stopping this. That was her platform. And leadership starts at the top. Catherine Truitt did not have any problem listening to, progressives and taking the leadership role in removing the biological sex from Power School. She doesn't have a problem leading there, but she has a problem leading here. Now, you're also going to hear from a guy named Terry Stoops, who used to work for Locke Foundation. Now he actually works for the DPI. He is a conservative journalist and has written about education. And we noticed a couple months ago, wow, he's writing really favorable stories on Superintendent Truitt when she just got a terrible result from her audit, or this happened or that happened. Well, lo and behold, those positive stories landed him a fat role in the DPI. So again, we're going to call balls and strikes. Why? Because the future of our country depends on it. Guys, if we cannot get varied viewpoints here in the classroom, if we're going to have Christians discriminated against in the classroom based on their faith, people based on their skin color, we got real problems here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, this isn't like we're looking to find something to directly connect to any particular one person. It just unfortunately keeps going there when you look at the materials and listen to the meetings and do public records requests. That my findings have been, for example, with Mr. Stoops in the glossary, with the social studies standards, if you remember the original glossary they presented was deeply flawed and biased towards progressive definitions. And Mr. Stoops, who at the time was working with John Locke, recognized that many of the definitions had been plagiarized from social justice websites. Well, that glossary was directly overseen by Catherine Truitt. She said it multiple times. We knew she was in charge of that, and yet it was still presented as a plagiarized glossary. Now, Terry Stoops spun it to say, well, she stopped it, but no, she didn't. They presented it anyway. And then when they did revise it, because they got caught with their hands in the cookie jar, she kept in the definitions like white privilege and gender identity and citations from the very progressive Aspen Institute, which she had promised to keep out at an Orange County meeting, specifically from the glossary. She says the glossary. So again, we have all of these twists and turny statements and spin of things that should have been managed and the leadership provided by our superintendent, and these things are still getting through.
Well, I remember that. Now, there were 3 key words that Catherine Truitt committed to leaving out of the glossary. It was privilege, it was systemic racism, and there was another one. So she made a lot of ballyhoo about leaving that out, and she put it back in. In other words, she came in and she said, "Hey, I'm in charge here. I'm the decider, and I'm going to take these words out." And she did not. She did not. So as you recall, when we go back to the discussion of the social studies standards, Thomas Fordham Institute, which is pretty even-handed. In fact, I know it's even-handed because leftists have a problem with it, and so do we. So that's a pretty good indication. But they came in and basically gave our social studies program a failing grade. You can't run for office and say, I want to head a department and I want to clean things up around here, and while at the same time saying I have no control. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. So again, just to recap, the Department of Public Instruction is being sued. There are some specific people being named, which we have dealt with, and the way that they dealt with us, Nancy, was identical to what we see in a lawsuit.
Ignored. Yep.
Right. So look, when we talk about school boards, right, how does this affect school boards? My interpretation is that, school board members, when you're hearing about this viewpoint discrimination from teachers, you got to take it seriously. You got to take it.
And I would also add to that, Sloan, if you see weird curricular materials, like radical curricular materials, or, you got to dig. You can't just do what Truitt did on the radio, which was say, oh, well, my lackeys told me that it was just this one teacher and he was dealt with and talked to and it's fine. You cannot trust the
He wasn't a teacher. Remember, he was just a dude.
He wasn't a licensed teacher, by the way. I researched him. He was not a licensed teacher in North Carolina or a teacher at all. So you have to do the research and you have to ask the next 1 or 2 questions. Like, okay, well, who's being affected by this? And is this ideology, this radical ideology, shutting people down? Because unfortunately, what we have, along with critical race theory and queer theory and intersectionality and systemic racism and all of those buzzwords, we find a segment of society of shaming those who question it. So you can pretty much be darn sure, if you start seeing it in the curriculum, there may very well be living some element around it that is causing intimidation and silence for anyone who wants to bring it up. So you really have to dig to find that. And one of the things is, I've learned it's hard for students to sue. Teachers generally have better cases. And what's so great about this lawsuit, if you read it, is he's standing up for a lot of students who were silenced, who were made fun of, who were bullied by staff, not just other students, but by staff who were supposed to be in charge of them, who were discriminated against because of immutable characteristics.
Their religion, their skin color, their sexuality.
Yeah. And unfortunately, they can't, necessarily do anything about it. And in this lawsuit, not only is it the issue of him being unfairly fired, but he really is so brave in naming these other issues and what has happened to students at that school in the name of tolerance. That's what I love, right? Like, this is tolerance and diversity. And meanwhile, they're harassing these poor students into silence. So yeah, I mean, I would just say, take it seriously and ask the next question and look for the next thing, because chances are it's not just a one-off at this point.
So we've been onboarding really new conservative school boards for the last 2 weeks. They've all come here to Raleigh for mandatory training. They've got to do a certain amount, ethics training, which is great. They've got to do it, I believe, every 2 years. But the question that we're getting is this, and actually we're working with some school board members who have been on the job for a while, and they're saying, look, we've got parents that are concerned about critical race theory, but I don't have any example. I don't know what to do. I mean, we don't want that here. We don't need it here. So what do we do? And so what we're advising school boards to do is set up kind of like what we have. We have Schoolhouse Shock. So we've got a confidential email that you can send in complaints. You need a confidential way so that teachers can talk to the board, right? Well, actually, you can't do that because you can record request it. There needs to be some communication channel, right? There needs to be, okay, you can submit it to us, but you don't have to put your name on this email, right? School boards need concrete examples, to your point, Nancy, where, God, I'm getting, I've got 15 of these from Elmhurst Elementary. Because you can bet your bottom dollar that there's viewpoint discrimination going on there. And maybe they're losing a lot of teachers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you have to be proactive. You can't expect people to necessarily come to you. So if you notice something, see something, or hear a word even, I mean, that's happened to me with my own kids, where it was just like hearing a couple words and being like, that doesn't sound right. Then do some digging and ask some open-ended questions. They don't have to be aggressive or anything. And say, hey, can I look at some of the books here in the room? Or, hey, are there any weird assignments you've seen lately that maybe made you uncomfortable or parents complained about? And you really have to be in those first couple steps proactive, because one, sometimes, the teachers or the students or whoever don't necessarily recognize it. They just know something's off. And two, they might be intimidated because they don't want to feel like they're causing trouble. They don't want to make any waves. They don't think anyone cares. So you start asking open-ended questions and showing that you're interested in figuring out what's going on. You gain trust, and then that communication builds. So I would just say, like, if you're in the administration or you're a new board member, I would not count on just sitting there and expecting it to come to you because you said, hey, come to me with your CRT problems. I think you have to physically keep your ears and eyes open. And if something triggers a little gut reaction, then you have to kind of, play the detective a little bit, I guess I would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, because everything starts with personnel, right? Personnel is policy. That's our whole point with Truitt, who, you know, her first act in office, and I hate to pick on her so much, but damn it, I mean, this is kind of a told you so moment, but personnel's policy, and her first act was to hire some hardcore leftists. And so what do you think is going to happen when you have, I mean, Democrat is fine, Republican's fine. When you carry it in and politicize everything, that's the problem. But when you have these folks who are supposed to be on the other end of the phone when teachers and principals have problems, what do you think is going to happen? We cannot have hardcore ideologues running the DPI.
Yeah. And if you do, you better be on top of every single little thing they do. I mean, just like in medicine, you know, if you're nervous about a junior resident or something, you're on top of that person all the time. So, and that was the point in trying to bring some of these ideologues to our attention and say, look at what they've said, look at what they write. This isn't their personal diary. This is what they're putting up on social media under their title of whatever it is they do in the DPI.
Exactly.
They're tweeting about white privilege. They're tweeting about, you know, racial identity, Southern Poverty Law Center, and in a very aggressive way. So, I mean, okay, have them on your staff, but you better be prepared and have a system in place to figure out, you know, to look at what they're actually doing. And, you know, that was ignored and told, you know, ridiculous and whatever else. And now this is what we have. So yeah, you have to, as a board member, I would say my advice would be to keep your ears and eyes open and to maybe do some proactive questioning. Again, not like intense NYPD.
Right. Yeah. Like, you know, where were you in the night away?
Yeah. But some recommended, like, hey, can I look at those books, or can I see the lesson plan, or you know, what curriculum materials concern you? What do you need? That kind of thing.
Well, look, when you ran on a platform, and this is what people are you know, concerned about. Whoops, not that. Wrong banner. When you better than the one I saw a long time ago. Put one up. Donald Trump kills 6 people. I think somebody was messing with a Chiron, but it was funny as hell. Anyway, you know, these conservative people have ran on a platform of getting CRT out. Now they want to know how to do it. Nancy, you told them just how to do it. So just recapping everything, love, this is going to be a very, very big lawsuit. Our friends at, you know, ADF, How, and
amazing people,
yeah, really great people. You know, it's nice to work on teams where you're all pulling in the same direction. And so this is the year I predict will be the year of litigation for our organization and for others like them. This is the time, you know, to start saying, hey, you know, we've waited for legislation long enough. We've waited for things to shake out, not shaken out. So
yeah, and again, like, it's all about this teacher, this man who's bringing this lawsuit, who is a fantastic teacher, has a heart of gold,
really great person,
not doing it for himself necessarily, but to bring to light all of the things that are going on under the nose of the NCDPI, even with their approval, perhaps. They haven't been doing their job in protecting these students, and he is stepping up to protect these students. And our hearts go out to him. And, you know, I hope everyone who's listening lends a little message of support in the comments or something, and lets him know how much we're rooting for him and how much we support him, because he is one brave person.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, this law firm, they do not launch suits that they're not prepared to take all the way to the Supreme Court and win. They just won one today. Yeah, I mean, they just won one today for anti-Christian discrimination. Go figure. Look, you know, if you are a person of faith, period, and you are out there with it, this is just a cost of doing business. I mean, discriminating against Christians and Jews, for that matter, that's currency of the realm of progressive politics, it seems. So, yeah,
it's really, in the name of tolerance, it makes it even worse.
In the name of tolerance, the Animal Farm 101, right? In the name of tolerance, all these things are done. So, all right. So let me give you the rundown. We're almost at Christmas. So if you celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah, Chag Sameach. Hope you lit your candles. And then Christmas is another week. So tomorrow night we have Chelsea Carpenter from Cabarrus County, who will be talking about standing up to this political nonsense of, hey, I'm going to take out a restraining order on you because you stared at me. So we'll have her on tomorrow night, and that'll be the last show before. I know. But again, I'm telling you guys,
serious stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be, when you stand for something, people are not going to like it.
No, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cost of doing business over here. So, this professor knows it, and you've got to take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune in this business and in the business of standing up for what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be talking to her tomorrow night, and then we will see you guys next week and give you a rundown of what's going on, because there's so much going on. At the end of the year, they pack so much in, Nancy, so we never get a break.
Yeah, when it rains, it pours. It's
yeah. At least it doesn't snow, but maybe.
Yeah, my kids want it to snow.
Well, I'll be in Florida, so.
Oh, good for you.
That's right. All right, guys, have a wonderful rest of your evening, and keep an eye on this case. We're going to keep
and read it. Go find it and read it. It's not a hard read, and you will be astonished.
And really mad too. So
mad.
That and when you read it, you'll know what we're fighting for, and it will give you the enthusiasm to continue on.
It puts it all in writing in legal format, and it is an excellent documentation of what is happening to students and teachers.
Yes, CRT in practice.
Dialogues. Yeah.
Yeah, CRT is not a curriculum. It's a practice. It's not something you pull out of your toolbox. It's a way of life. We got to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, guys, have a wonderful night.